So we have people represented from 11 countries from the region. I think this is absolutely incredible. And it's also very good to see friends, comrades, and colleagues. I think the fact that we are gathering here as a people, it speaks to hope. I always say that hope is strategic. It's strategic because it helps us to take action. It helps us to pause. It helps us to lament. And it helps us to make plans going forward.
A particularly tough year for human rights defenders in Southern Africa. As colleagues before me have previously said, we began the year on a tragic note with the death of Comrade Thulani Maseko, as has been mentioned before. The death of Comrade Thulani Maseko heightened the concerns that we have for human rights defenders, not only in Eswatini, but throughout the region. Judicial harassment, violence, torture, and the murder of human rights defenders continues to persist. However, in the face of all these vices, I'm encouraged by the tenacity of all the human rights defenders, those that are with us today and those that have left us, to continue to demonstrate and to remain resolute to our quest to advance the ability of our people to access their fundamental freedoms and human rights.
That Southern Africa has witnessed tremendous progress made by human rights defenders in safeguarding human rights through their engagements with regional bodies, governments, and the civil society organizations. Their efforts have resulted in increased awareness and recognition of human rights, but much work lies ahead. There is a way for political transition in the Southern African region, which brings about a heightened need to promote and protect human rights without fear or favor. Human rights defenders must be able to confront these issues head-on and work without fear of reprisals, and this requires collaborative cooperation between government, civil society organizations, human rights institutions, and other stakeholders to ensure that human rights defenders are respected and protected when carrying out their duties. Once again, welcome to Namibia, and may our deliberations lead to enduring positive change in the landscape of human rights in Southern Africa. I thank you.
So today, examining what is happening around us, when democracy is in recession, rule of law, defense of human rights, and enjoyment of human rights also goes down. And with it breeds a culture of fear. So even where people have been used to having their say, people start becoming quiet and not talking much. You're buying your peace for the day. And I think we have a reason to be very worried and to ask, how do we combat what is happening? Once again, I salute you. You are standing up, not just for your countries and for Africa. You stand up for humanity. When you fail to stand up for human rights, you actually lay the foundation for the violation of your own rights. So we are here for ourselves and for humanity. I salute you.
Together,
We defend!
together,
We defend!
it's okay, they wrote it fine, we use it, it's ours. But we must understand another reality. At the time this was being written, all the countries that were in that room all had colonies in Africa. When they said every man must be free, they were not talking about us, huh? They were not talking about us, you understand what I'm saying? Right. They were human rights defenders, they knew how to hide you if the Boers are looking for you. Yes. They knew how to defend and protect you.
So at that time, living in a repressive system or slavery or colonization, which is the rights to participate, the rights to defend human rights. And I think this is what is missing today.
So let us talk to the issues that we face critically as women, because we bear the right. At the end of the day, it is us left to fight. So let us address these issues, but be mindful that women are in the front line and women need our support.
And then we will take a few comments from the floor as well.
I'll go back to what Daniel mentioned about empowering the community, and I think my submission would be, I think we need to get to a point where we're strengthening knowledge of human rights ahead of crisis. Because I usually see that it becomes a reactionary thing where we're waiting until there's a war or something happening, but we're talking about defenders or defending defenders. The defender is every single individual. Because my rights are in here, I should be able to understand my rights from as early as possible because they're universal. So even when we talk about the school system, as early as possible, each and every person should understand what their rights are and be able to defend them as early as possible before even any of these organizations step in. And I think that's maybe how we can start to strengthen and move towards protecting our rights.
Thank you so much.
I would like that, especially here in Namibia, we be more accountable when we speak. Even as we were at this event today, we spoke as if we really did make strides in our democracy and defending human rights. And we did, I will not take that away from us. But you speak of a country where your elections were held to be unconstitutional and you kept them. You kept the result. You speak of a country where you have such a high unemployment rate and the people in parliament are telling you to figure it out as the youth.
If my comments do not resonate. Sylvia, 25 years ago, we did not face that question of the relevance of human rights framework, at least on the, what we call international discourse, right? It might have been very live in some communities. So what's the world today? What do you see as threats? What do you see as opportunities? What do you see as challenges?
The idea of inclusion. Young people, for example, we had them before lunch. They want to get involved. When we talk about liberations, emphasis on the individual, who is that individual? When you're an individual and you are willing to disrupt social norms, this is the must emphasize. Go beyond what other people see as acceptable, change is possible.
For me, if being a human rights defender is based on your job or the place that you're coming from, and it's not based on you looking at human rights as human rights, you know, it's disturbing. And it's also around challenging how funding is coming to the different communities and tokenizing people's bodies, you know, of how people would want to say, oh, I'm a human rights defender because there is money for you to speak on LGBTI rights, and yet you don't believe in them.
resilience, I always start from what your foundation is. What is it that you believe? What are you standing for? Because if you're uncertain about that, do not move forward, do not proceed. That is the foundation upon everything, upon which everything is built. And it's what keeps you going when you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's what will allow you to fight for a cause till the death. Because you need to believe in something. I mean, somebody earlier mentioned how some people are driven by donor funds. In my eyes, you're not a human rights defender if you've got no conviction. And that, I think, is how to bring resilience. Continue with your purpose and what you believe in and stand for it no matter what.
Thank you so much. Someone that believes in education, my first one would be human rights training. I totally agree with the young lady. We need to do much more to educate people. And in that context, not just on your right not to be tortured, your right not to be, not to be allowed to protest. Those civic and political rights.
The liberation war was won in communities. It was won in the rural areas, it was won in villages. And you remember that they would hide the combatants. Are we building that kind of resilience in communities? That if a human rights activist stands and says government must provide water, they can come and hide in your houses. Or we don't want to associate with those people because, I will also be labeled a human rights activist, and then the full weight of the law will come upon you. So we need to go back to communities. And lastly, as Linda mentioned, there are issues that will not be popular with everyone, but we should still work together. The death penalty is still not popular, but it's still something that Amnesty works on. I think even if I was to ask half the room whether you support the death penalty or not, half would probably say we are pro, we are pro capital punishment. Some would say the death penalty must be abolished, but that doesn't mean that we should leave those who say the death penalty must not be abolished behind. Let's find ways of bringing them on board.
Thank you so much, colleagues, panelists. The professor will thank you.
Of generational solidarity, I think in layman's terms really stems from what is it that as young people that I think are living and trying to make it in a world that is predominated by the older generation rather, regardless of the fact that we as young people are the majority.
What I think is also important in addition to what has been said, I think we need to ask ourselves some difficult questions and about our perceptions and views towards each other. And we also need to understand our differences. Then understand the power dynamics between, our generations, because there are some power dynamics at play. And also, having done that, I think we need to confront what we think we know and what we think is right. Then understand our strengths, because I believe in this struggle it takes the wisdom of the elders and young people's age.
And the only way they can become involved is if we implement civic education, especially in primary schools. because it doesn't matter, it doesn't make sense if, it doesn't make sense saying that young people should become involved in political activities if they don't even understand and know their human rights. They don't know their fundamental rights. So if their rights are being violated, they don't know what to do because they themselves don't understand.
So I wanted us to verify whether are we on the right or on the left. On my space as Umhlali, I'm more of the leftist. It is very hard for me to go to the government and tell the government to change the policies. But I can only use the same constitution to enforce the government to do what's right for me as the citizen. So I'm still using the same structure, I'm still in the same formation that's oppressing me.
Today was so amazing where we are all gathered here in Namibia, where we have over 11 countries participating under one banner of the Southern Defenders, where we are literally reflecting on 75 years of human rights declaration, what has been achieved, what are we currently working on, and what does the future look like. As a young person, I see a bright future, a future where policies are going to see radical transmission in implementation, where young people are also going to take key center stage in driving the force, and also where we know that when we talk about human defenders, we're defending together, but collectively there is radical and tangible implementation. Day one was super successful, was amazing, where we had different panels talking about different aspects, the work they are doing across the continent, especially within the region. But the favorite part of the summit for me was the youth panel, where young people took the center stage to say, well, listen, as young people, we are equally participating in the space. We will not wait to be called to join the table, but we are taking it by force, boldly and firmly, without any fear of contradiction. Beautiful summit. Looking forward to day two.
My name is Moses Ntuli from the organization called Ubunyiba Mahostela, KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. So I've enjoyed the conference today. So I've learned a lot from different comrades, from different communities. So, and we also understand each other's struggle from different areas. So now we understand how to approach the difficulties that we are facing in our areas. So it was quite clear and interesting. So I think maybe by tomorrow we will get another information more than what we have just received today.
So the first day of the conference was really interesting. The morning sessions with the keynotes and the opening remarks posed some really interesting questions, especially around how do you shame the shameless, how do you continue to support networks of solidarity, how do you grow them, how do you innovate in a new context, in a new world, and one that has deepening authoritarianism, deepening crises around the world. How do we make visible the invisible? For instance, the struggles in Darfur, in the Congo, and so forth. And so, yeah, I had a good time.
What is your participation at the table? What do you bring to the table, for instance? And so, whilst the numbers of particularly women in the Namibian context looks very good, the international indices have also given us an indication that Namibia is doing very well in sub-Saharan Africa, number 1, 8th in the world. But what do those numbers translate to at the domestic level? What do those numbers mean? If we say, for instance, that 65% of young women at university are graduating, basically beating young men to it, the question we should be asking next is, what are our young women studying, for instance?
what do I appreciate? I appreciate and I have hope in our judiciary, that's number one, in Namibia, based on all the current rulings that have been happening in the High Court as well as in the Supreme Court of Namibia. As a queer trans activist in the country, you know, getting that sort of recognition, being seen, being heard, being included is very key to participate fully as a Namibian citizen and contribute to the economic, social, and cultural sectors of our country. So the inclusion within mainstream media, within the judiciary, is one of the main things that I do appreciate. I appreciate our president for saying nobody should be left behind in the Namibian House.
Yes, I won the award earlier this year in February. It's an African Defenders Award. Given to human rights defenders who have shown outstanding courage. I don't know whether I fit that, but who have shown outstanding courage in the work that they do in facing their challenges on a daily basis and still continuing with the work. And the Shield Award is a validation for the work that we do as human rights defenders. We never ever get credit for the work that we do, but through these awards, you get validation and you get recognition from your peers to say, what you're doing matters, what you're doing makes a difference somewhere, so continue doing what you're doing, regardless of the challenges and you know, the other barriers that you face, either from state actors, your government, or from other human rights defenders.
So, we live in a highly patriarchal society, which sometimes, not sometimes, I think most of the time, makes it difficult for us as women to be able to claim the same roles. The minister spoke about women needing to be on the table, and I think sometimes we find ourselves on the table as women. But what does it mean to be on the table? We are sometimes there to window dress. We sometimes find ourselves, you know, there to just in the faces where they say, oh, we are taking the boxes, yes, we are being in the streets. And then there's also an issue around the depoliticization of our struggles as women, using the legal framework to do that. So you now have the laws are available to you. What else are you seeking?
That came up in my mind that I would love to term it as, from an African perspective, when it comes to the LGBTQ community, we tolerate it, but we do not accept it. And the theme being words to works. What are we doing to make sure that the young men are able to accept the fact that the LGBTQ community is also you know, represented, they are also humans, they are also having rights. You know, instead of us simply being tolerant to it, we should be able to accept it. So the whole theme of words to works, what are the works that we are implementing or doing to ensure that this happens in the near future?
At the street corner in my country and lift up a banner like this and say defend her or deny her, because if you do not defend her, you're denying her. As a government, if you do not defend a woman through policies and practices that are rights enabling, basically you're denying her fundamental rights. I want to be able to protest. Civic space, offline, we understand it. We want to protest. We want to access information. We don't want barriers. I don't want to stand by the street corner and experience January 2019, where live ammunition is being shot at me because I'm exercising my right to food, to economic development, among others. I want to end properly so that I can have a life with dignity.
First question basically goes as follows. How effective are civic engagements online in influencing public policies as opposed to civic engagements, like physical civic engagements such as protesting or boycotting government lines? So how effective are online civic engagements? And the second question goes as follows. Misinformation is a detrimental part when it comes to the online space, right? It's so detrimental to a point where most people aren't able to form their own, let me say, original ideas anymore. It's just this misinformation, this propaganda, such as we could give the case of Israel and what they're doing right now with the propaganda that is spreading. So how do we, as human rights defenders, ensure that this misinformation doesn't reach the people that we're trying to defend? How do we ensure that the people that we're trying to reach have proper information that they can use to then go onto these social media platforms and argue?
When I was growing up as a young man, I always used to be told that power is never given away freely. It is taken away from. If the space is not given, grab it. Take it. Take it. And most of the times you take it through performance.
Who then persuaded the president at the last minute not to sign that deal. And therefore the bill was not signed. For a long time we then relaxed to say that this thing was behind us. But it was introduced again and it came before Parliament. This is a law again in which the government attempts to control civil society. The government intends to bring in a regulator, a registrar, who has more power even than the minister. Because among other things, for example, they will do away with the board at the moment with the private voluntary organization board.
The central nerve for a democratic government. And when we talk about elections, we are basically talking about the oxygen of democracy. In itself, it is a right. And we have no reason to stand up and satisfy whether we as human rights defenders have the role to play in elections.
I think over the years we have seen in Africa that there's a culture that young people are not necessarily participating in elections. So I think as human rights defenders, we must be able to interrogate and ask ourselves the question, how are we actively making voting and participating in the electoral processes and in democratic processes in a nutshell? How are they fashionable for young people and for our citizens? But most importantly, we must also be able to address a very critical issue in Africa, which is what we call the phenomenon of bot voters, where we have a lot of people, especially from rural areas, for instance. It's very, very easy to round up those people and coerce them and push them into the voting venue. So at the end of the day, most of our electoral processes in Africa, when young people or when people vote, they are not necessarily voting based on their own understanding, but most of it is coercion. So how do we ensure that when we push for a fair electoral process, we ensure that our people are educated, number one, they are informed and they are aware of the political landscape of Namibia and all African countries? Because let's be honest, I cannot walk into a venue to go vote when I do not understand the politics of the country and I cannot align my aspirations with those of the candidates that are presented before me.
Together, we defend. Together, we defend. Together, we defend. Together, we defend. So my task is an easier one, just to summarize what we have deliberated over the last 2 days. This is my sixth summit. I've attended each and every summit since the first summit in 2018. And this is by far the best summit we've had as Southern Defenders. The level of participation, the quality of conversations are unmatched. And you need to give yourselves a round of applause. The first commitment, comrades and friends, make the Universal Declaration of Human Rights a living document. Through the work done at all levels, from grassroots or frontline, will ensure that UDHR is not just a document, rather a lived reality in the lives of our communities, our decision makers, and ourselves. The principle of universality, inclusivity, is critical in ensuring the rebirth of the UDHR. All partnerships and spaces must ensure the inclusion of minority groups. And this is not tokenistic inclusion. We mean meaningful inclusion. This is a global theme that informs all aspects of the work done by and with human rights defenders in Southern Africa. And this is important to vitalize and strengthen the provisions contained in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
I'm a 19-year-old and I'm a UNAM student. Well, I should say that the past 2 days have been amazing. I had fun at the summit, and after the summit I did get I do now have a different perspective on human rights, and I pledge as of today to be a human rights advocate. And my highlight for the event was definitely the panel discussion that we had yesterday with Prof.
Good evening everyone, my name is Tandam Kari from the Digital Society of Africa, and we are excited to be here for the 6th time for the Southern Human Rights Defenders Summit. And we are representing Digital Society of Africa, and we literally enjoyed day 2 simply because of the conversation that activists and human rights defenders have been talking about around safety. Safety is something that is now a big issue, especially in the digital and online spaces. and we were coming up with strategies and mitigation solutions with all those who came to the help desk. So we do applaud Southern Defenders for this, and we do appreciate everyone who came to the desk, and we are still available for any conversations around your holistic security.
My name is Mondumi Songwenya, and I really had a fantastic time at the summit this past 2 days. We really just learned about some of the practices that we've already been doing as Africans that we should be doing a bit better on. For example, with the Declaration on Human Rights, with the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, these are things that we've been doing for ages before it was even put in place as a tool that we can use. But as Africans, these are the things that we've already been doing, but we're now just doing in a more westernized manner. So I think those are a few of the things that I really felt like were impactful, to see that there are things that we've already been doing, but we changed our way of doing them, but we can still go back to doing them in the normal way, or rather in the original way, and still be able to implement a lot of change that will benefit individuals in Africa and ensure that their human rights are also well catered for. Thank you.